Hello everyone, we have with us Jessica, Field Innovation Officer, ServiceNow. Jessica, welcome to Tech on an Edge.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You know, Jessica, I just want to understand, what is it to be a Field Innovation Officer? Maybe could you describe a day in a life of a Field Innovation Officer?
It's actually a really good question. I don't even know. The funny thing is, my day could be completely different to the previous day. So to pinpoint one would be a little bit awkward. What I can do is I can say what we're mostly involved in. So as an innovation officer, most people think we actually develop on the platform and we develop our innovation on our platform, but we don't. We are the external innovation officer. So what does that mean is we go into customers, C-levels, it could be CIO, CTO, CFO, whatever, and we try to figure out how we can change their business, not necessarily our business, but change their business using our platform. And that is a little bit different because day one, you could be a manufacturing company. Day two, you could be in a healthcare facility. You could be in, in building a new city like a NEOM, or you could be into oil and gas, or you can be anywhere. So for me, depending on the customers that I see and depending on what I'm doing, I need to be very agile, very nimble. And I also need to be able to understand what they're trying to achieve. And then how does that fit into what we do? So it's a very varied role. And day one, I could be with a technical guy. Day two, I could be with a financial guy. Day three, I could be with the CIO. So it's very, very difficult to pinpoint one day, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
It sounds very interesting too, meeting different kinds of people, trying different things, experimenting new things. But what got you intrigued and interested about technology? Because your role seems very vast and diverse across sectors. Why technology specifically?
I've always been a bit of a geek, I guess. When I was young, I've got a Greek dad, and there was two options when I was studying. I think in your heritage, you can probably relate. So it was either lawyer, doctor, or advocate.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, lawyer, advocate is the same thing, Dad. And he goes like, no, it's different things. I'm like, oh, whatever. And then doctor, I'm like, I'm not too keen on doing anatomy and cutting up people. So I don't know whether I'm going to do that. So essentially, these are like the 80s and the 90s, because I'm a 70s kid, right? There was no IT. There was nothing that was similar. So I had to find something that triggered me. And I think when I was about 13, 14 years old, I got into playing with computers. And my dad was wealthy enough to buy me a Commodore 64.
Wow.
Because at the time it was ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. Which year was this?
Oh, somewhere in the late 80s, beginning 90s, something like that.
Yeah.
I can't pinpoint the exact year, but I remember I got this computer and the first thing I did was take a screwdriver and take it apart. And my dad was looking at me and is like, what did you just do? And I'm like, I have no idea, but I want to know how it works. And instead of, I think everybody who was from that age, we all played the winter games, the summer games. We had the joysticks, we had the floppy disks, which were like the really big floppy disks. So I wanted to figure out how that worked. And before that, even before I got the laptop, I was always stealing my dad's tools. I was taking my bicycle, going into the forest, trying to build like camps, or trying to build houses, or even build houses for my Barbie doll, which my mom presumed I needed a Barbie doll. And I was actually building furniture and housing for the Barbie doll. So there was an intriguing moment into building, curiosity, figuring out how things work. And then with the Commodore 64, I kind of figured out that I wanted to do something with electronics.
Right.
And then after school, I needed to go and study, obviously, but I didn't find what I wanted to do. And I said to my dad, I said, look, you know what? Let me just start to work and see where I end up with. And I was very lucky to be able to go to a job agency. And they were like, yeah, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know, anything. Clean toilets, I don't care. As long as I do anything, because going home to a Greek father without a job was not an option, right? And she's like, yeah, but you've got a little bit of a history in studying. I did Latin, Greek and everything. And she's like, would you think computers or something? And I'm like, yeah, let's try this. So there was an entry exam at a company, and I think it was about 300 people that were in there. And it was a full day, and we needed to basically test our skills. And it was logical reasoning, it was programming, it was a few bits and pieces to figure out whether we were capable of being system engineers for Isabel, which was a banking system that they just started in the 90s. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I should try this. So she's like, yeah, there's nothing you can lose. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. There's nothing I can lose. So
Yeah.
let's go. Let's test. Did the test with 300. We came out with about 80 people, and I was one of them.
Wow. Tell us about Isabel. Tell me about Isabel, because it sounds interesting, because 90s, I think online banking wasn't big and you still were in a world of desktops. Phones, mobile phones, the way we use it today clearly did not exist. But
Well, I did have my first mobile phone, which was like a Ericsson, like
those
big,
brick ones.
Yeah, the big. I call them lunch boxes. It was one step after the ones that were solid in the car. Those.
Yeah.
So I did get one of those. I did get a company car as well, which was like a Peugeot 106, like the smallest company car ever. And Isabel was basically run together with Telindus in Belgium, and it was the first online banking that was existing. Now, the desktops, as you rightfully say, there was no laptops, there wasn't anything. The desktops needed to have a smart card reader.
Right.
Now, the smart card reader needed to have serial ports. The serial ports, per definition, were used for the keyboard and the mouse. So they were all full.
Yeah.
So what we needed to do, and this was one of the tests that we needed to do, we needed to open up the desktop and we needed to plug in an IRQ card.
You like opening up desktops.
Exactly.
Anyway.
So I was in my forte there. So I was opening this up, and I remember they had like all of these desktops standing there. We had a little bit of a white paper with the instructions of the IRQ card. And basically what they said is make it work. That was the assignment. So I opened up the thing.
Quite clear.
Put the IRQ card in and started to read the thing and go like, whatever, let's just try it. And I figured out quite quickly how it needed to happen, because you needed to have these little fingers, and some of the men had difficulties because their fingers wouldn't actually fit the IRQ card in order to change the IRQs on there. And I got it to work as like one of the first 20 people, I guess, screwed closed the desktop and started up, and it worked. The serial card that I just installed worked.
Wow.
And that was the moment when I kind of went like, hey, I can do this. And they're like, so what is your background? What have you studied? And I'm like, not a lot, because I wanted to be a doctor, but then I didn't want to be a doctor. And then I wanted to do this and this. And essentially, I didn't find my MBA or I didn't find my master's or bachelor or whatever, because it didn't exist at that time. And they're like, yeah, we'll give it to you. So basically, Telindus was the company that was hosting the installments for the Isabel group. So Isabel was basically the OS, the platform. And then the integrator was Telindus at the time. And Telindus had something which was called THTI, so Telindus High Tech Institute. So the John Cordier Institute, which basically was one of the founders who said, there's not enough IT skills, so let's build an institute. Let's get everybody in there. 1 month of studying, 1 month of working. 1 month of studying, 1 month of working. And that's how I got through the whole engineering part. And I basically graduated after a year and a half, full on as a technical engineer, by combining everything that I learned in theory the next month in an assignment at a customer.
That's just so brilliant. It makes, because technology as such, anything in terms of technology is so hands-on. Unless and until you work on it, you're not going to understand how it works in theory. Classes just don't help as much. But technology has also evolved from the time you started, and you have been in the field for so long. I just want to get a sense from you of what are the kind of shifts you've seen over time?
Lots of shifts. I think the one thing which is constant is still we're saving money and we're transforming IT. I think that's a constant for the last 20 years.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
Every time we go into a company, it's like cost savings. And every time we go into a company, we need to transform whatever IT is doing. And I guess because it's a constant, it also means that it actually does change, right? I think when we look at the 90s, it was more of how do we make mainframe work? How do we make, Baan, JD Edwards, all of those programming tools work? It was the era when Microsoft started to launch their NT4. I was one of the first who actually went into the Belgian Post group and did the NT4 to Windows 2000 Active Directory migration. We were working closely with Microsoft on it because they had no clue. We had no clue. And then all of a sudden, you were there. And I remember in 1999, at New Year's, we were all paid a lot of money for the Y2K issue, which apparently wasn't all of an issue because we had champagne, we had pizza, and the thing just went from 1999 to 2000 without a flinch. But again, we had no idea. It could have gone horribly wrong. And I think looking at where we sit and our perception of how technology moves, we learned a lot over the years. But then again, you look at what happened in 2023, ChatGPT came on. There was a whole new technology.
Oh, yeah.
We can apply this to everything that we know. Yeah. And now this text to code comes in. This different way of thinking comes in. These linguistic skills come in. So I think looking at how, tech has evolved over the years, there was a few large flows, I think, and I think the Microsoft flows were primarily the ones to follow, right? So we had the NT4, the Windows 2000, and then afterwards, the Active Directories and everything that came on top of that. Then we had a big shift into programming languages with GitHub, Jira, and everything. The whole development cycle has shifted. And then the back end, if you look at where networking went into, I think the last 5 to 10 years, 15 years was more IoT related, how we bring in the factories into what everything sits inside IT. And I think if you look at the OSI layers, I remember, when we were young, we needed to learn all of the OSI layers of the network and how everything fits in. And what I now see is that a lot of the youngsters that come into IT, they assume everything is on IP version 6 and they assume that everything connects to everything. I'm like, whoa, guys. There's a whole new world out there that you haven't actually touched. But they are more into the application layers and not necessarily into the management layers or the operational layers. So I think looking at where I sit, I probably was very lucky getting the baselines of the hardcore programming, getting the baselines of the first Windows and the first, federated Active Directories and security and everything around it. The first SMS integration, so that was software management systems. It's not SMS on the iPhone, but it's SMS as in the Microsoft way, where we started to deploy applications and everything. So I went through all of that. And essentially now today I go into customers and I'm like, listen, I have had blood, sweat and tears on my hands for years. What you are trying to do, I have done. So let me now bring you to the new century of using new tooling to do the same thing that you've done before, but in a different fashion. And a lot of times coming from the point of being a technologist, actually screwing open a desktop and putting in an IRQ card to the point of running a P&L of $40 million as a general manager for Europe, I know every aspect of what they're going through. And I think that gives me the opportunity in my job to go sit with them and say, hang on, I feel your pain. I know what you're going through. The business case is one thing, but the reality is something else. Yeah. Let's see how we can make your life a little bit easier using platforms like a Microsoft, ServiceNow, Azure, AWS, whatever might be out there, even the Jira and the GitHub and everything, because essentially from a ServiceNow perspective, yes, we have a platform. Yes, we have all of those things, but we also have an ecosystem play.
Yeah.
So my beauty is that I do not need to compensate on any other platform. If a customer has made a choice on a platform, SAP, Oracle, whatever, they can keep it and we'll integrate with it. But my special skills come in to say, okay, how do we now make sure that whatever you have accelerates using the new technologies? And that's basically where my role sits today. And I think the only reason I can do this, and we always call ourselves five-legged sheep, because it's not easy to find somebody with the same background as I have. Yeah. It's not. We do have a few of them in our team, and we have some other guys who have different backgrounds, and they were struggling in the first few years to figure out, what do we do? How do we do it? Because it's a gut feeling. It's a gut feeling. It's something that you live through. It's something that you can resonate with your customer with, and then you can start to co-develop and co-create.
Right. And Jessica, you touched on an interesting point about these large flows over a period of time. You had the dot-com bubble. Yes. I remember, when the dot-com boom was there were so many internet companies, just so many internet companies with these fancy offices. And when the bust happened, it happened and how. And then, then there was the 2008 crisis, then there was COVID. There's just so many shifts that actually, when you look back, they have actually enabled the growth of technology in a different, very, very different and unique way. I just want to understand, when you speak to so many different industries and, stakeholders in different sectors, what are the current needs and requirements of technology? Because you do have a lot of keywords being thrown in. Everyone talks about Gen AI today. Everyone has an opinion on Gen AI, whether they...
I believe you.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I also have one.
No, so to just understand how does it work then? Because sometimes some technologies do fit in, sometimes they don't. How do you integrate and understand that?
It's actually a very good question. And I remember when I was leading IoT for Dimension Data, I did a small project called the Tour de France. So we were doing all of the IoT of the Tour de France. So basically understanding how fast the bicycle was going, how the rider would be positioned on the bike, how they would do the wave in terms of the wind dispersion and everything. So the thing is, what I always said in the beginning is, you can put a sensor on everything, but does it make sense?
Yeah.
So my philosophy is always going back to the core and ask the question. I'm the annoying 2-year-old that says, why are we doing this?
But why?
Why? And then if people don't give me a solid reason why, I'm not too keen on do it, to be honest. Because essentially you're spending money, you're spending time, you're spending effort. And if you don't know what the outcome is going to be, or what the gain is going to be, or why you want to do something specific, why do it? And a lot of times customers come to me and they go like, yeah, we need a platform for this. And I'm like, okay, why? And then they can't give me a reason. They say, because we like this feature. And I'm like, okay, I get that, but that feature sits somewhere else. So why this specific platform? And they go like, because we're used to it. And I'm like, well, that's something that we can remediate. We can teach you on the other platform. So I'm a nasty one when it comes to understanding the ecosystem, because most of the times people need to give me business cases. People need to give me value realizations. People need to convince me to say this is why we need it. And if it's a solid reason, don't get me wrong, I'll keep it. Right? And I always say to my customers, I'm like, listen, if you made a purchase of a certain platform, there might have been a specific reason that was really good. And at the time, with the limited knowledge that you had of that era, it might have been the best choice. I agree with you. But looking at that same environment today with different knowledge, with different background, with different possibilities, is it still the right choice?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But, Jessica, like I did mention, you did say that 2023 ChatGPT came out and it's just changed. Nobody imagined. AI has been around for a long time. Yeah, really long time. And but what's interesting now is it's become very, very commonplace. And it's someone told me in a conversation that what Gen AI is doing is it's democratizing technology in a way that nobody imagined. So how do you integrate platforms or generative AI, and what is the impact of this overall across sectors? Because again, a lot of people do say if you don't incorporate AI, you're no longer a technology company. I don't know if it's extreme or what is the case right now, but want to understand from your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think AI is like an iPhone moment, right?
Yeah.
I remember my life before my iPhone. It was completely different than my life after my iPhone.
Tell me about it.
So you got to put this in perspective. When I started in IT, the data centers were the size of a regular room. Yeah, that was a data center. Now, if you look at that power in 1996, 1997, 1998, that same amount of power sits in your back pocket in an iPhone.
Exactly.
And I might actually add on to that it has double the power of what the original data center had, right? So technology becomes smaller, nimble, and more, affordable, A. B, the way that you used to be able to use technology was by being an extreme nerd and understanding ones and zeros, right? So you needed to have a programming skill, you needed to have an analytical mind, you needed to have logical reasoning, you needed to have all of those things to think through these things. And I remember when I was programming, I had tools to help me with my syntax, I had tools to help me with all of that. That was step one. Now imagine putting that logical reasoning, that tool of the syntax and that computing power at the fingertips of whoever might want to use it, irrelevant whether they have an analytical mind, irrelevant whether they have programming skills, or irrelevant of whether they understand what actually they're doing. The system can build it for them. Now, this is where Gen AI comes in.
Right.
Now, a lot of the times I go into customers, and don't get me wrong, Gen AI is not cheap. Yeah? It's not cheap. It's per transaction, and you need multiple AIs. You don't need one, so you might want to combine Copilot with Bard with the ServiceNow AI or whatever, Microsoft, other AIs, or you might want to build your own. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not cheap if you look at it from a transactional perspective.
Exactly. It's very expensive to even build it, right?
Exactly. But the benefits you can get out of it are massively. Now, the problem lies in the fact that most people look at it as a technology. It's not a technology. It's a human enablement. Now, when you look at it from a human enablement perspective, so this is where skill gaps come in. This is where people with dyslexic backgrounds can all of a sudden write fantastic emails. This is where we can incorporate other human beings into our organization, which normally didn't have the skills to do this.
Democratizing on a different level.
But also accelerating in speed. Now, where do you save? It's the human that you save. So when I go into use cases, and it could be going into a call center and summarizing calls, it could be doing self-service, it could be anything that you have, which we have used GenAI for already with customers, and even within ServiceNow, we have saved about $13 million in our support using automation and GenAI.
Right.
$13 million. Now, the $13 million is not saved in IT. It is saved into the organization. So the issue is that the budget for GenAI is mostly put into IT, but the savings do not reflect into IT. The savings reflect into HR, the savings reflect into the bigger P&L. So this is where a lot of customers say, GenAI is extremely expensive, we shouldn't be doing it. I'm like, hold on, look at the bigger picture. Because if you are sitting inside a company and all of a sudden you become 20 times more productive.
Nothing like it.
Hey, means I don't have to hire any extra people because that's still the bigger cost of a company. Means that my retention is very low. Means that I can go quicker to market. Means that I'm ahead of competition. And means that I can build new go-to-markets. That does not reflect into IT. But that is the benefit that a Gen AI, which is very democratized and which is very, non-selective to IP people, can give your company.
Right.
And I think a lot of times when a company really gets Gen AI, that's when they put it in as a global company structure. But they also calculate the savings as a company, not as an IT tool.
Right. Right. Jessica, I just want to understand now there is, I think with the recent announcement of NVIDIA, there's also talk about, I know this goes a little away, but since we are in the conversation around how technology is evolving, I just want to get a sense of what is your take on artificial general intelligence, AGI? Because that sounds scary. It seems scary. Everyone is already talking about how scary it can be. And someone told me, while Jensen says it's 3 years down the lane, someone said 5 years. Whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, it's happening.
It is happening.
It is happening. And it's futuristic. I understand that, but not too futuristic either.
Well, the problem is, and this is where I always say, if I would have had a glass ball and I would have known the future, I probably would have filled in the lottery and not work anymore. So I have no clue. I can only guess and I can only suggest and I can only, see the potential. Is it coming? Yes. 3 to 5 years, no idea. I might think that considering text to code is here, considering that Gen AI goes extremely fast, it might actually be quicker. Yes. Because if you're going to be thinking about NVIDIA, if you're going to be thinking about what they're doing with Hugging Face and ServiceNow at StarCoder 2, if we're going to be enabling developers to do quick development based upon conversations and not based upon code, how fast can you go? You can start to accelerate, right? And if that conversation means adapt this, adjust this, modify this, and all of a sudden the code down the back is modified instantly, well, the speed of development is just going to accelerate massively.
Yeah.
So I think the 3 to 5 years is still with our standard brain of this is how we need to do UA testing, development, and everything.
Yeah.
So I normally go into these things thinking that we only grasp the top of the iceberg now. Yeah. And I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen. What we will also see is with all of these new technologies being built, there is a massive shift that a lot of people are not calculating for, which is the economy. Development is one thing. And are we going to develop it? Yes or no? Technology-wise, we can definitely develop it. I don't think that's an issue. But the question is, are they going to allow it to be developed? I remember when Elon Musk a few years ago said AI is the most dangerous thing there is, right? The more and more we find regulation, the more and more we see things happening. And I think, we're in a good area in the Middle East because we're embracing it, we're forming regulations, we're doing all of that. US is fully containing AI. Europe is putting in rules to avoid AI to a certain extent. and is basically containing the potential impact AI has on companies. So the question should also be, do we allow it to fully develop? Because some people might actually halt it before it is there. And I think the most likely scenario is that it will be developed in an area where they embrace technology.
Right.
Which would probably be Asia Pacific, Middle East, or something like that.
Right.
What I do think and what I see, because last week I was in Europe, sovereignty hits high. GDPR, massive issue. Everywhere they look at intellectual property and everything that comes behind, which you basically risk when you go full on Gen AI, is being pulled back. So 80 to 90% of the customers are blocking every website .ai, and they're doing LLMs internally.
Oh,
now,
okay.
knowing that trend, knowing what is going to happen on the other side when you open it up and when it potentially comes, the Uber thing,
yeah,
are they going to allow it? And that is the question that I'm always asking myself. Technology-wise, we can. Should we be afraid of it? I think we should start to train it and we should start to program it, but there is no way that human beings with a cognitive mind can actually control it.
Exactly.
That's very simple. So knowing that, how far do you let it go?
And that adds to my flip question, Jessica, but if you can't control it, it's going to grow anyway. I just see that in my nose head. I see this as a natural progression. And because it's learning so fast. It's learning and growing so fast. How are you going to stop that, or how are you going to curtail that?
Well,
it seems like a natural progression, whether you want it or not.
There will always be a part which naturally grows and progresses. I understand that, and I do agree with that. But the question is, what are you going to feed into it? And that's where I think the halt's going to be. I know companies in Europe that have fully blocked AI.
Wow.
Fully. And the reason being intellectual property, the reason being the risk of competitors getting a hand on what they have. I think it was a Japanese company that did the business model on ChatGPT, and then the competitors picked it up, and then they built a different business model versus and they basically went higher onto the market. So there is a big risk, I think, looking from a technology development, aka students, the open source community and everything, they will continue to develop, right? Not a discussion about that. But does the corporate world follow? And I think the biggest data hub actually sits inside the corporate world today. So if the corporate world doesn't allow it to continue, would we be able to develop it? I don't know.
Right.
And that's where the chicken and egg comes in, because essentially what I always say, pardon my French here, people, but shit out. So you train an AI, right?
Yeah.
And if the data going into the AI is not right, we've seen there was I can't remember who posted it, but there was a UK bank that did an AI on CVs.
Okay.
Right? And they basically, whenever they had CVs coming in, they would chuck them into the AI and then say, what is most likely the good candidate to come out of it? Now, they based that data upon older data of the physical CVs coming in and the physical people getting the job. Funny enough, the AI developed a bias. Because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, and 2010s, these jobs were given to male.
Yeah.
They were all given to men. So the AI assumed
that it's going to be only men.
It's only men. So they actually unconsciously developed a bias in their AI. And they then had to recalibrate the AI to say, hey, this can also be women. But he was basing himself upon this CV turns into a male job. This CV turns into a male job. So essentially, all the women were automatically categorized out by the AI. Because the AI said 80 to 90% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, it's a male candidate. So again, coming back to my out, we need to understand what we need to put in there. We need to cleanse the data. We need to make sure that we understand what we are chucking into this AI, irrelevant of what the form is going to be. Right? And yes, we can play around with Midjourney. We can play around with all of those things from a personal perspective. There's no harm in that unless you deep fake your face, go into the iPhone and hack your banking system. So there's always a risk back there. And I think The corporate world will be the world that sets halt to some of these things, because if they don't, they are the ones taking the bigger risk.
Yeah, you're right. I think we can go on and on. But,
definitely.
But I just want to understand, looking at where technology is at right now and the speed at which everything is changing and transforming, what do you see as one of the top key trends that organizations should be prepared for in 2024 or this year?
Well, I think you should start with the basics. First of all, you need to have good governance, and you need to have clear instructions on what you can and cannot do inside an organization. Step one. And I think a lot of the organizations have not done that yet. Because when I talk to employees and I'm like, you have an AI policy? And they go like, what policy? What is an AI policy? Well, an AI policy is what you can put into AI and what you cannot put into AI. No clue. Second, AI and the way that we work and the way that we do our job and the way that we ask questions is going to change our behavior, right? The iPhone moment. So the way I wake up in the morning is I check my emails on my iPhone. I don't even go to my laptop.
Yeah.
In the 80s, 90s, you would not be able to do this on a phone. So you would literally go to the laptop. You would go to the office. Post-COVID, we will work from anywhere. So that changes our behavior, right?
Yeah.
Now with Gen AI, the question is, do you still need to work from anywhere? Do you need to ask something? Will we have it in a ring? Will we have it built in? Will we have goggles that will actually show us things? That's going to change the way that we behave. That's going to change the way that we do businesses. But what we've seen is that a lot of times, and we're obviously very focused on business processes, we have digitized business processes, but we have not transformed business processes. Let me give you an example. Anytime you go into a UAE bank, what do you have to do? You have to fill in 25 different papers. And these papers might be digital on an iPad, but you still need to sign papers. Why? Because we digitized the process. We didn't really check, hang on, what do we really need? We need to know your customer, the KYC. Does that need papers? No, it doesn't need papers. It just needs a verification. But that can be in a different format, right? That could be a digital signature. That could be anything. But does it need to be physical paper? No, it does not. And the reason the banks need physical paper is because the government needs the physical paper, because they haven't changed the procedure on how to get to banks. Now, when you then see how Saudi is doing it differently at the moment, you can open a bank account in less than 5 minutes in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, wow.
Using your phone. Because they digitized and they changed the process. There is no more physical requirement for paperwork. You can just sign online, and this is based upon, I think it might be based upon what Revolut is doing or what some of the other digital banks are doing, but essentially they'll give you a credit or a bank account with a limitation until they've done the full KYC. So instead of going through the KYC fully, they take an amount of risk, but give you that convenience of opening a business account immediately. So again, looking at what we're doing, have we really shifted how we operate inside an organization? We probably haven't. And what I keep on pushing my customers onto is ask yourself, why are we doing it and why we should be doing it differently?
Right.
And that differently is really thinking outside of the box and saying, look, okay, I want to get a new car. Fine, loans. How do we do loans? Why does it have to be a tedious process? You know the car. You know exactly what it's been through. You have the RTA background. You have everything that you need to have. Why do I physically need to sign? Why do I physically need to do anything?
Makes sense.
Makes total sense, right?
Makes
and then
sense.
If you then map that into potentially what a ChatGPT does, then essentially it should be, hey, insure my car for the next 3 days because I'm going to Oman. The whole thing should be automatically. You should get your orange slip. You should get everything immediately. And by the way, it should not be downloaded. It should just be available.
Yeah.
And it should be proactively sent to customs. It should be proactively sent to police. Why do you need to carry it along? Because essentially the procedure says you need to carry it with you.
Yeah.
But we have never changed those procedures. So I think the next step with Gen AI, because changing those procedures means knowledge, technical knowledge. But now with Gen AI, we don't need that technical knowledge anymore.
We don't.
So now anybody who knows how to ask a question, who knows how to challenge a process, can then change the actual process. And then it's down to the company to verify technologically whether we tick all the boxes, yes or no. But that initial step of building, which, 10, 15 years ago, we needed 50K to build a proof of concept. And after that proof of concept was good, we might get the full budget and we might do it. Today, it's flipped around. Today, we use low code, no code. We build it, we show them, and then we go like, yeah, let's go implement it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a shift that is happening now. And I do believe that skill is not in the organizations yet. They haven't adopted to a full extent of allowing people to do citizen development.
Interesting. Great. On that note, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for your time. And it's been a great conversation. I love talking with you on this topic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.